we're kind of like recovering heroin addicts. They're crackheads. We've spent a really, really long time focusing on just one thing only, to the neglect of everything else. So this is also partially a process of just remembering what else is out there, what else is available. There's a concept in art called negative space. And if you've seen some of the depictions, one of the more famous ones is the vase picture. You have a vase and the contours and it comes around. And depending on how you look at it, it's either two people looking at each other or it's a vase. Depending on where you put your negative space mentally. And that's like the first example of negative space. That's the most easy to see, most obvious. When you're looking at physical objects, there's an outline around them. And you just see the object, here's hand, and then here's the edge of hand, and then all this stuff out here is pressing itself in upon it. And you can look at the hand as a thing itself, or you can look at it as how do you say it? You can look at one or the other. You can look at the hand as a thing, or you can look at this whole other part, the shape that's created when the hand is within it. You can look at this whole other part. And if the hand is moving, then the hand is not necessarily moving, but the outside is moving the shape of the hand, or moving around the shape of the hand. And it's the same thing with all of the sensory perceptions that we have. We have 5 supposed ones: sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. Those are the 5 main ones, but there are a whole bunch of derivatives, and there's more than 5. There's also thought. And there's a gradation of subtleties and nuances within each sense category. And this idea of negative space, it's with everything. So the next easy example to think about is music, which I've touched on, but in music, we oftentimes focus on the sound of the music. What does the song sound like? How does it make me feel? But we neglect to think about the spaces in between the tones, in between the notes, in between the cymbals and the drum beats. The spaces between those are vital for the song and absolutely necessary. And you can actually create different sounding music if you put your emphasis on the spaces between the notes as you're creating it. Or at the very least, incorporate the perception or feeling of those spaces while you're creating it. And it's the same thing with all of it. You can even take your touch, your feel, your sense, skin, whatever feels that you get when you touch something. When you get a direct feeling as you touch an object, the negative space of that feeling is there as well. It's not as easy to discern as, say, the negative space of the outline of an object. It's not as easy to discern that, but Robbie will probably explain this perhaps better when he's gonna come on soon. But anyway, what you have when you're touching something, if you feel into it, there's also the negative imprint of that happens simultaneously as you're touching the object. The object is also touching you in one sense, okay? So normally we're grabbing a steering wheel, we're thinking, this is my hand, this is life and organic, and the steering wheel is this dead thing, and I'm the only one that's moving, and so on and so forth. Well, you can flip your thought perception of that to where the steering wheel is not just a dead thing that's moving at your touch, but to where you're entering into its like movement life, really. And you're feeling the life of the steering wheel through your touch. You're feeling everything about it. And that's a way of feeling the negative space of the steering wheel touch. And as well, there's not just that. There's also, like Robbie would also say, he talks about holding this little ball bearing looking, like a marble. And when he would do his psychedelics, sometimes be walking down the beach or whatever, holding this ball bearing, he'd put it in one hand to the other, and he would ask himself, what is it to not, what is it in between me holding this or me transferring this to my hand? What's this space in between that feeling? Because if I'm holding it, if I'm transferring it, it's always with me in some instant. And how do I even get rid of it? Can I get rid of it? Is it possible to get rid of that ball bearing? I could put it somewhere else, but it's still here. Can I get rid of it, What is not holding the ball bearing? What is not transferring it between my hands? When you're touching something, what is the negative space of that touch? The touch itself, what's the negative space of the touch? And the same goes with all of it. So like even with thoughts, when you have a thought, you're apprehending an upcoming event or situation, anything that comes up in your life. Well, there's a negative space of that thought, which you can go into and you can explore. And your exploration of the thought itself and the negative space thought will give you a clearer picture of what that thing actually is. Instead of just thinking of, oh, there's this event and I must do it. I hate this event, but I have to do it. So fuck this event, but I have to do it. There's also the negative space or negative imprint of the thought. There's the possibility of not doing that thought, of course. That's an example of negative space. There's the possibility of moving, using the thought as a template, and moving into all of the derivatives or variations or iterations of the event that you're considering. There's the possibility of moving the event around, just like a marker on a ruler or something. You can scoot that thing over. And with thoughts, you can situate yourself relative to them, and you can play with it. So you can sit there and identify and think, I'm this, I am that, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I am very organized, and I'm very identified with these things, and these things make me happy, and I have responsibilities, and I am affecting other people in my life, and the thoughts are a construct through which I can manage the life. That's like one way to think about thoughts. And then you could think of them as many mystics and so on have thought about them, and or tools to think about thoughts. But they're like, it's clouds passing through the sky of your mind. You don't do anything with them. They just float on through, and you watch them go. And as well, if action is taken upon any of those thoughts, well, you're watching that action float through as well. And then there are methods to quiet the mind, so your thoughtscape, so to speak, isn't so fucking stormy and loud and impinging on you at every waking moment. There are ways to quiet your thought sky. Some people are into cloud popping, in regular sky, or they're focusing on the cloud, and the thing dissolves or whatever. And you can do the same thing with thoughts. It's malleable. It's not like they're external to you and some alien thing just floating through your head. And if you characterize them as that, then that's how you're going to experience them, but you don't have to. Oh. For every single perception that we have, there's a negative to it. And if you're only sitting in the perception itself, you're only seeing half the picture. Every single one, all five of the main ones, and then all the derivatives of those, there's a negative of that. And if you go into both all the time, you're doing kind of like what Og was talking about earlier on in his thing, where he was talking about perception and attention, and how you can take your attention, instead of focusing it on just this thing or this thing or this thing or this thing or this thought, or my eyesight, or the future or the past or whatever. Instead of doing that, you have an array of things coming or around you at all times, okay? Inner, outer, all five senses, all the derivatives of those, future, past, present, everything, okay? You have all those things. And you have also the ability to focus on any one of them, mentally and with the outside appendages, and with combination of those. And we're used to just zooming in on certain things. We're used to, there's some worry thoughts happening, okay, in the brain, amongst billions of other things that are happening in this sphere right here. Well, we're just gonna go shoop. You just like your whole self just like the like those little energy balls. You touch the finger and the energy's like whoop. That's what you do with your worry thoughts. Is that everything else is still going on perfectly fine, but you've just like stuck yourself up against the wall and to that thought, and then you just stay there. And the practice is it's simply a matter of when that thing tries to like suck you up. Well, okay, you just notice that sucking up as one of many aspects, and you just tell yourself, okay, so this one's yelling, this wheel is being exceptionally squeaky right now, and I feel the attention, pulling over there. But then I'll just at the same time notice everything else that's still happening like it always is, and I'll even out my perception and go back to the expansive nature, which I am anyway. Before these things came along, that would take my certain eensy teensy bits of myself and try to have the whole life be focused just on those. Retirement, that's an example. Think about retirement. And some people get all worried about retirement. They spend all this time, putting into this, into that, into the other thing, into this IRA, and into this, growth account, or to this. Some people just put them into savings accounts with 1% or less, which does nothing. But there are lots of ways to think about that. But people spend a whole bunch of time worrying about that. The future itself is one tiny little aspect thing of the whole life, and people will sit there and sit in that for their entire waking moment, their endless waking moment, which is their whole entire life. It's just a really long day. They'll sit there in their really long day, and they'll just be projecting the whole time. The little donkey and his carrot, they'll do that the entire life. And that's another example of what we fell into this extreme focus on elements within the whole, like fucking crackheads, And to counteract that, to counterbalance that, is to just, if you notice a certain pull happening in one direction, well, look at that thing. Look at if it's something that needs attention, because generally speaking, if something is pulling your attention one way or the other, there's an issue there, and you ought to look at it. Okay, well, look at it, but don't spend 10,000 days looking at it. Look at it, resolve it if you can, and if you can't, let it go. And then return your awareness back to a comprehensive, holistic look. Feeling, perception mode that allows all of it, but doesn't allow any one of the perceptions to come and go, I am everything, I will take all of you. I am everything. Don't do that. And it's totally fine, yeah.